During the night, confirmation arrived of a new massive strike on Ukrainian territory. For several hours, dozens of drones and missiles crossed the sky, and residents of large cities reported explosions. Particularly alarming reports came from Odessa, where, according to eyewitnesses, the attack was accompanied by the detonation of air defense systems. Local authorities reported damage to infrastructure in the area. International news agencies confirmed that this was one of the most powerful attacks in recent times. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all the key news. Like and comment to help promote the video and spread information that is particularly important today. Air raid alerts were declared in various areas, and in some areas the electricity was cut off for several hours at a time. This is not a random incident, but part of a large operation that was prepared in advance. Over the past few months, the parties have exchanged strikes on energy and military infrastructure facilities. Now it is time for a new round, and the consequences are already beginning to be felt. Early in the morning, Kiev officials acknowledged that some of the facilities had been damaged, although the exact extent of the damage is still unknown. On social media, Ukrainian users shared photos of neighborhoods without power and empty streets where traffic was paralyzed. Sources in the Russian military had previously warned that the operation would be lengthy and designed to deprive the enemy of some of its supply and coordination capabilities. The focus is not only on strikes against warehouses and communications nodes, but also on disabling distribution centers. According to experts, if the attacks continue at the same pace, Ukraine could face serious difficulties during the heating season. At the same time, nervousness is growing in the information field. In Kyiv, there is talk of a possible repeat of previous year's scenarios, when mass power cuts and heating failures cause panic. The authorities are trying to convince the population that the system will hold out, but Russian President Vladimir Putin's statements that Russia has long endured attacks and is now responding sound like a direct warning. In Odessa, the entire air defense system was operational last night. According to eyewitness reports, drones were circling in the sky, provoking calculations for opening fire. When the batteries fired, their positions were struck. Local residents described it as fireworks, but the bright flashes concealed serious consequences. According to underground coordinators, 2 systems covering the northern outskirts of the city were hit. At the same time, strikes hit targets deep inside the country. Industrial enterprises and infrastructure were damaged in Lutsk and the Khmelnytsky region. In the Kirovograd region, a railway line used to transport equipment and ammunition came under fire. Strikes were also recorded in the capital, but the Kyiv authorities traditionally claim that most of the targets were intercepted. The international media began to actively discuss footage showing strategic bombers in action. According to various estimates, there were at least 7 missile carriers in the air, including 2 95 and 2 160 aircraft. Their participation underscores the scale of the operation. This is not a pinpoint strike, but part of a comprehensive campaign that Moscow is presenting as a response to attacks on oil refineries and fuel depots. While the Ukrainian side is trying to assess the consequences, Russia notes that this operation could be a turning point. The command states that the damage caused cannot be quickly repaired. The emphasis is on destroying precisely those facilities that will take months and significant resources to repair. For Ukraine, this means not only military but also economic risks. All this is happening against the backdrop of international negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced the completion of security guarantees for Ukraine. However, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has already called these initiatives dangerous for Europe. According to her, guarantees in their current form will only cement Ukraine's position as a springboard for provocations. Leave your comments and share your opinion. It is important for our future work. The operation that has unfolded in recent days was not improvised. Preparations took weeks, maybe even months. From the very beginning, the command relied on intelligence and agent networks operating deep within enemy territory. It was they who gave the first signals about where fuel depots were concentrated, in which areas equipment was located, and which routes were used to transfer units. This data formed the basis of maps and reports, which were then analyzed by military analysts. Particular attention was paid to air defense systems. According to observers, a dense network of complexes had been deployed in the Odessa area. That is why electronic warfare specialists were involved in the preparation of the operation. Their task was to blind the radars and create corridors for strike drones and missiles. Every step was planned in detail. Possible Ukrainian responses were discussed at staff meetings. It was important to maintain the element of surprise. Therefore, some of the forces simulated preparations in other directions to divert attention. This is a classic tactic that allows you to strike where the enemy least expects it. Observers report that in the days leading up to the attack, there was increased activity by strategic bombers. Tu-95 and Tu-160 aircraft were on duty in the air, indicating the imminent start of a major operation. At the same time, naval units were preparing sea-based cruise missiles, and strike complexes were being tested at airfields in central Russia. Intelligence provided photographs and coordinates of ammunition depots and industrial facilities used for equipment repairs. Energy hubs were studied particularly carefully. According to experts, a strike on distribution stations could knock out entire regions, and restoring such facilities would take weeks or even months. That is why they were included in the list of priority targets. The work of intelligence networks was a key part of the preparations. People on the ground risked a lot by passing on information about the movements of convoys, the operating hours of anti-aircraft units, and fuel delivery routes. This information was transmitted via secure channels and verified by satellite reconnaissance. Only then was the target confirmed. As the plan took shape, a sense of anxiety grew in the headquarters. Everyone understood that the coming night could be a turning point. If successful, the enemy would lose a significant part of its logistical capabilities. If it failed, the consequences could be extremely serious for Russia itself, as the enemy would certainly try to use the failure in the information war. On the day of the operation, the command set a specific start time. It was tied to data on the state of the Ukrainian air defense system. According to intelligence reports, it was during this period that part of the calculations were to be replaced and the equipment was undergoing maintenance. This meant that the defenses would not be able to operate at full capacity. When the command to begin was given, the first drones began moving along pre-planned routes. Their course was calculated so that they would appear in different areas at the same time. Some of the drones served as decoys, distracting attention and provoking the batteries to open fire. Others moved toward the main targets. With each passing hour, the tension grew. New marks appeared on the maps in the command post, recording the movement of the strike forces. Radio intelligence noted the first activations of Ukrainian radars. This meant that the enemy had noticed the activity but did not yet understand where the main strike would be. Meanwhile, air raid sirens were sounding in cities. Sirens sounded in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, and the Kirovohrad region. This phase of the operation was only the beginning. Ahead lay the moment of attack itself, when warehouses would be set on fire, railway lines would be stopped, and communication nodes would fall silent. When the clock approached the agreed time, the main phase of the attack began. Dozens of unmanned aerial vehicles were already in the air. Some of them circled the surrounding area, forcing air defense units to turn on their radars, while others continued to move toward their targets. According to eyewitnesses, the sky over Odessa was streaked with tracer bullets. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, but many of the drones continued on their way. The first powerful explosion rocked an industrial area on the outskirts of the city. Witnesses reported a bright flash and clouds of smoke rising above warehouse buildings. A few minutes later, a series of strikes followed on other targets. Local telegram channels reported detonations in the air defense system area. People described the scene as a fiery fireworks display, but behind it lay a serious loss for the city's defense. At the same time, strikes were recorded in the Kirovohrad and Khmelnytsky regions. In the Kirovohrad region, railway infrastructure used to transport equipment and ammunition was damaged. In the Khmelnytsky region, a defense industry enterprise that manufactured components for military equipment was hit by. In Lutsk, strikes hit an airfield and warehouses. In Kyiv, several districts were left without power during the night. The authorities acknowledged the damage, but, as usual, claimed that most of the targets had been intercepted. However, footage posted on social media showed destruction and fires at some of the sites. Strategic bombers were operating in the skies over the Black Sea. According to sources, at least 5 Tu-95 and 2 Tu-160 aircraft participated in the operation. Cruise missiles were launched from their decks, complementing the drone strikes. This combined approach increased the density of the attack and overloaded Ukraine's air defense system. By morning, it became clear that the night had been marked by one of the most massive strikes in recent months. Ukrainian media reported on the work of rescue workers, power outages, and damage to businesses. Russian sources claimed that key targets had been hit. The first reactions appeared in the international media. European leaders expressed concern about the new round of escalation. French President Emmanuel Macron announced his readiness to provide Ukraine with additional security guarantees, while Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova called such initiatives a step that poses a threat to the entire continent. Meanwhile, analysts discussed the possible consequences for Ukraine's economy. Damage to energy facilities could lead to prolonged power outages, which is critical on the eve of the heating season. Experts recalled the events of 2022 and 2023, when massive attacks on the power grid had already led to collapse in some regions. Evacuations were recorded in some areas. In Odessa, some districts were temporarily cut off from the power supply, and local authorities organized heating and temporary accommodation centers. In Lutsk and the Kirovograd region, roads were blocked to allow rescue vehicles to pass. All this underscored the seriousness of the situation. These were not isolated attacks, but a systematic operation aimed at striking a blow to logistics and energy. It is now clear that the parties have entered a new phase of confrontation, the consequences of which will be felt for a long time to come. Subscribe to our channel, like, and comment, so that as many people as possible can see this content. After the night strikes ended, lively discussions began among experts. Analysts note that Russia has clearly shifted to a strategy of long-term pressure on Ukraine's infrastructure. Unlike the campaigns of 2022 and 2023, the current attacks are focused not only on electricity generation, but also on distribution hubs, logistics, and railway lines. This means that the damage will be more difficult to repair, and that recovery will require significant resources and time. According to experts, one of Moscow's goals is to demonstrate that Ukraine is unable to guarantee security even in its rear regions. This approach undermines morale and at the same time increases pressure on the country's leadership. This is becoming a test for the Ukrainian authorities, as the population's discontent is growing amid losses in the energy sector, and mobilization is meeting with increasing resistance. The international reaction was predictably divided. European leaders were quick to express solidarity with Kyiv. French President Emmanuel Macron said that preparations for security guarantees for Ukraine had been completed. In London, there was renewed talk of supplying additional weapons. At the same time, the United States continues to insist on negotiations, although its rhetoric remains ambiguous. On the one hand, Donald Trump's administration talks about finding a way out of the conflict, while on the other, the Pentagon announces an expansion of military aid. The Russian side responds by claiming that the operation is a necessary measure. Vladimir Putin's statements that strikes on Russian oil refineries could not go unanswered sound like a clear signal. The Russian Foreign Ministry emphasizes that these are mirror actions, which means that Kiev is responsible for the escalation. Experts' forecasts differ. Some analysts believe that massive attacks on Ukraine's energy sector will continue until mid-autumn. If the campaign is implemented in full, by November, most of the country could face limited electricity supply for 15 or more hours a day. This will lead to a slowdown in the economy and disruption to transport and medical facilities. Other experts believe that Ukraine will try to respond by intensifying attacks on Russian regions. There are already reports of dozens of drones shot down over the Rostov region and the Black Sea. According to experts, such tactics may become even more intense. However, the Russian military claims that its air defense has been adapted to new challenges. Particular attention is being paid to the international factor. Germany is preparing to increase the size of its army and invest significant funds in the defense sector. Finland and the Baltic countries are carrying out engineering work on the border, mining territories, and even considering the possibility of swamping certain areas. These are all elements of preparation for a possible expansion of the conflict. General Andrei Mordvichev warned last year that a special military operation could be just the beginning of a larger confrontation. His words sound particularly alarming now, as Europe is indeed accelerating its rearmament. It's a vicious circle. The more the West prepares for a possible war, the more likely it is that this scenario will come to pass. At the same time, internal contradictions are intensifying in Ukraine itself. Governors of several regions are publicly talking about a lack of resources, and volunteer organizations are reporting massive losses. According to estimates by Russian security forces, the Ukrainian army's monthly losses may exceed 11,000 killed and wounded. Kiev does not officially confirm these figures, but indirect evidence indicates that the situation is dire. The coming weeks will be a test for the international community. If the campaign of strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure continues, Europe will face a new wave of refugees and increased pressure on its energy systems. In the winter of 2025, European capitals may be faced with a choice: continue to increase support for Kyiv or seek ways to negotiate with Moscow. Analysts believe that further escalation is most likely. Ukraine will seek to maintain Western support while Russia will increase pressure. In this scenario, peace talks seem unlikely for now. So we have witnessed a new large-scale operation, the consequences of which will be felt for a long time to come. The nighttime strikes on Ukraine's infrastructure have shown that the conflict is entering a new phase. With each passing week, tensions are rising, and the number of resources involved is growing. For millions of people, this means new evacuations, power outages, transportation disruptions, and a constant sense of anxiety. We are witnessing the gradual destruction of the region's familiar security system. On the one hand, Ukraine is receiving promises of support and guarantees from its European allies. On the other, Russia insists that its actions are a necessary response to strikes on oil refineries and supply facilities. There is no common ground between these positions, and this is what makes the prospect of negotiations increasingly remote. In the political context, the strikes have sent a signal to the international community. Moscow is showing that it is prepared to see the campaign through to the end and that the economic difficulties of its opponent are part of its strategy. Kiev, despite its losses, continues to insist on Western support and is demanding an expansion of military aid. European capitals are hesitant, realizing that any additional aid means further escalation. Within Ukraine itself, pressure on the government is growing. Power outages, rumors of massive losses, and difficulties with mobilization are fueling discontent. Social media is rife with reports of delays in payments to military families, supply problems, and the fact that many regions lack basic living conditions. All this is undermining the stability of the government, although official rhetoric remains tough. International experts warn that if the trend continues, the world could see the largest humanitarian crisis in the history of the conflict in the fall and winter. Millions of people could be left without electricity and heating, and hundreds of thousands will be forced to seek refuge in neighboring countries. Europe is preparing for such a scenario, but resources may not be sufficient. It is clear to observers that the situation is escalating. Each new attack has increasingly serious consequences. Ukraine is losing its infrastructure and economy, Russia is increasing pressure, and the West is becoming more deeply involved. This is how a picture is forming in which the front line is no longer limited to a single territory, and the consequences are being felt across the entire continent. Today we told you about how the strikes took place, what targets were chosen, how they affected Ukraine, and what significance they have for international politics. All of this reminds us that the conflict is in its most dangerous phase, and there are no signs of it ending soon. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on all the key events. Like and comment on our videos to help promote them and make them available to a wider audience. Your participation helps us continue our work and show the whole truth about what is happening.